Okay, our first writer. Laura Young is one of our core volunteers, and she was so inspired by the support and encouragement at the Waterline Writers community gave her after she read in April that she has not been able to stop writing since. Tonight she will be reading further excerpts from her memoir in progress, commemorating her experiences as a caregiver for her father, a photograph of whom is part of the carbon exhibit you see at the gallery tonight. It's over here. It turns out that photograph was not the first time he was captured by an artist. Welcome, Laura. So this will be a multimedia presentation. I will be showing a couple of things. If you can't see them from where you're sitting, don't worry, because we'll put things over here after the break. This is called The Hairdo. I would love to paint your father's portrait. Do you think he'd be comfortable sitting for me? My father had been in the process of dispersing many of his worldly possessions, for reasons neither of us directly named. And as a result, my friend Tony had become the recipient of one of his cameras. In gratitude for his gift, she, a portrait artist, wanted to give him a gift in return. I don't believe she knew that he was dying, only that he hadn't been well. I did not know how to broach the subject with my father at first. In truth, I was not sure having a portrait done of him in his currently wan and emaciated state was appropriate. I had not genuinely accepted his frailty and dishevelment as a permanent state. This man did not really look like my father. Did I really want this apparition before me to be memorialized in his place? But my feelings aside, Tony wanted to reciprocate for his gift, and so I decided to simply deliver the message and let him decide. He was delighted. I've had a lot of things done to this body in my life, but posing for an artist, this is going to be a first. His brightness wiped away all my apprehension for the moment. Okay, I'll bring her out next week if you like the idea. By all means, we'd love to have her here. I peered at him. Dad, I know she's an artist, but no nude posing. I'm going to be there, and I don't want to see that. Whatever you do, keep it tasteful. He shrugged, unconcerned. All right, Bugs, whatever you say. I'm just saying, I know what can happen when artists get together. Behave. There is something that happens to one's vision when a stranger first enters a scene that has become familiar to you. When Tony walked in, I saw my father anew with his patchy shave and unkempt hair. Because he had a guest, he had bypassed his oversized robe with 2 pockets in favor of one of his favorite pullover zippered sweatshirts, whose bulk accentuated by contrast his bony frame. Again, I began to question whether I was right to bring her here. For her part, having never met my father, Tony expressed no reaction other than enthusiasm. She thanked my father for the camera and praised the lovely view of the gardens and lagoon, which we could see through the row of windows lining his dining room. She didn't seem the least bit ambivalent about getting her sketch pads laid out. As far as she knew, this is what my father looked like. She spread the tools of her trade on the table and gushed, "Oh, the light in here is fantastic. This is an artist's dream." And with that, she started to sketch accurately. I busied myself around them, doing my normal household tasks as though it were any other visit. But all the while, I was searching inside for the right words to present Tony's handiwork when it came time for my father to see it. Even though I knew he had several mirrors in the house, and even though just the week before I had come in to find him with an electric drill in his hand, intently puncturing holes into a leather belt that had become much too large for him, I still didn't know if he saw what I was seeing. Oblivious to my inner turmoil, my father sat still as a yogi, looking out contemplatively over his prized specimen trees, as Tony drew bright swaths of color over the penciled outlines of his face. As I worked my way behind him to water the veritable jungle of exotic houseplants, he broke his reverie to restate a comment he had made to me many times in the past. a sideways jab at my mother, who was not known for her ability to keep a clean house. "We must have gotten the wrong baby at the hospital, 'cause you are always cleaning." I smiled and said, "Maybe so, Dad, maybe so." I had long ago learned to let my divorced parents' comments about each other march past me like tired pack horses who only know one trail and can never be steered to walk any other path. But I never anticipated what would come next. Maintaining his contemplative demeanor, my father added, "Yeah, I think maybe you must have been an Indian, maybe Apache or Navajo, 'cause you never stopped working." I lifted the watering can and turned to face him with a slightly amused, slightly mortified, "What the heck are you even talking about?" expression on my face. I was about to ask him to explain the connection between overwork and the Navajo, a tribe I will admit I don't know a great detail about, when I realized in horror that Tony was accurately capturing the fact that my father had failed to comb his hair that morning. In fact, outside of dressing for trips to the doctor's office, through these long months of illness, my father had fallen out of several habits of personal hygiene. They simply took too much effort, and most of his hours were spent in bed with his dogs, watching television or sleeping. With the benefit of Tony's eyes and the canvas before me, my view of our new normal suddenly took on new technicolor dimensions, literally. Hoping the window of opportunity for damage control was still open a crack, I eyed his tousled, thick white hair with the white eyebrows, wild eyebrows to match, and shook my head. "Here," I handed my father a comb. "You may want to use this before Tony goes much further." He carefully combed down the front, leaving the back exactly as it was, splayed out like a startled cockatoo. I stared at him, eyebrows raised. He read my look and shrugged it off. "Who's going to see the back?" I looked to the heavens to concede my defeat and resumed my Navajo-like work focus. My only consolation is knowing that my real father has long, luxuriant braids. When Tony had finished her preliminary sketching and color washes, she flashed one of her bright as the sun smiles at us. "Ready to see it? I have to finish it at home with several more steps, but you can see the beginnings of it." I braced myself as she turned the portrait toward us. "It looks just like me." My father beamed at her. "I'll admit, I wasn't expecting it to be too good, Tony. I've seen people do portraits, and it looks like a kindergartner did them. But you are good, Tony. You got me." And she did. She got him 3 months before he died. Before I go, she asked, "I'd like to ask you one more favor. I've been commissioned to do a portrait series for the Markham Library, 6 large pieces. One is going to be of an adult reading to a children's group, and I'd like a grandfatherly type for that. Would you let me take some photos to use you as my model?" "Tony, are you telling me I look like a grandfatherly type to you? Oh, now that really hurts." She laughed and proceeded to snap several shots of my father from all angles, including the uncombed back of his head, while I sat watching them mystified. My father had never read a single word to a child from any book in his 78 years. And yet, he looked like he was in heaven at the thought of being a model for a library mural. When I told my husband what transpired after I returned home that evening, he laughed. What was he reading? Crutchfield's Guide? I can hear him now. "Hey kids, listen up. The Klipsch amplifier is capable of delivering 1,000 watts of power to drive 2 high-performance amplifiers, subwoofers. Now that is a lot of power, kids. That is what I would call an amplifier el hombre." Oh my God, I know. It was so surreal watching him and Tony. He absolutely loved it, and he was all for having his picture taken. But I'm a little worried about the cosmic ramifications. At the very least, we will be immortalizing an entirely fictitious event. If we are not careful, I'm afraid we may rip a hole in the time-space continuum and open a portal to some strange parallel universe. When I received the poignant framed portrait of my father sometime later, I asked Tony about the experience. Even though she didn't have the reference point of my father as a healthy man, what was it like to do a portrait of someone who was so evidently close to death? She answered simply and without hesitation. I went in expecting to see beauty, and that is what I found. As for me, it turned out I did want that strange man who looked a little like my father to be immortalized after all. I see him on my wall every day. And as for the good people of Markham, you can see him in their library reading to a group of eager children. Crutchfield's Guide? Nah, even better. My dad is reading Slinky, Binky, and Winky. And from what I can see, is loving every immortalized moment of it.